On the surface, what happened in March 2026 looks like a standard update for American space exploration, but look closer, look beyond the screen, and you will see the cracks in the mainstream narrative. When J. Isaacman took the stage at NASA headquarters in Washington, District of Columbia, one word was projected. A single, decisive word: ignition. They tell us this is the beginning of a transformative journey, a rejection of the status quo that has accomplished very little for decades. The cover story is compelling: a blueprint for colonizing the moon, a great power competition against Chinese advances. But that history is deliberately falsified, a thin veil covering a scrambled agenda. They keep telling us the goal is not flags and footprints, it is to stay, but have you ever stopped to wonder why? If we conquered the moon over 50 years ago, they are suddenly treating this like an unachievable goal. Why are they overhauling the schedule, cancelling the planned Lunar Gateway station to prioritize surface operations? They aren't building a city. They are initiating a desperate excavation of a lost old world heritage, and they just realized they are not the only ones looking. They tell us that the space race the world saw before in the 1960s was about national pride, but the missing pieces of our past suggest a different motive entirely. Now, NASA claims they need intelligent plans, acknowledging that the Artemis moon program has lacked them since the very beginning. They tell us that the new blueprint begins with a complete overhaul of the landing schedule. But a schedule for what, exactly? For Artemis 3, they announced a shocking change, a pivot that makes no sense unless you understand what they are hiding. There will be no boots on the moon for this mission. Instead, it has been reformatted into a dress rehearsal mission playing out in low Earth orbit. The official narrative claims that the old plan, which required jumping from Artemis 2, a crude test flight of the Orion spacecraft, to landing on the moon using an entirely separate and unproven HALS vehicle, was an unachievable goal with a risk factor so high it never would have gotten off the ground. But is it really about risk, or did they discover that the destination is much more dangerous than a lifeless rock? Under the new direction, the crew of Artemis 3 will rendezvous with the lander in low Earth orbit, testing life support, communications, propulsion systems, and the new Lunar EVA spacesuits inside the lander airlock for the first time. They claim this is to solve problems and save lives if anything fails. But what are they actually preparing these astronauts to face? For years, the moon lander was assumed to be a lunar variant of the SpaceX Starship, but suddenly the narrative shifts. Isaacman has confirmed that Blue Origin is back in the race alongside SpaceX with their Blue Moon lander, and one or both of these vehicles will be tested on Artemis 3. They put SpaceX on notice, stating that winning a contract in 2022 does not guarantee a moon landing. The deadline for Artemis 3 has been abruptly moved up to next year, 2027, demanding incredible speed from the winner. They are desperate. They are rushing to turn around a completed design for Artemis 4, scheduled for early 2028, which is when America allegedly returns to the moon with a landing in the South Pole region. Why the sudden panic? Why was this erased history suddenly the most urgent mission on Earth? Because they know the physical evidence of the old world isn't just buried under the mud of our cities, it is waiting in the silent shadows of the lunar South Pole. To mask this urgent recovery operation, NASA will land people on the moon again in 2028, with Artemis 5 scheduled before the end of that same year. They claim this overly ambitious schedule mimics their golden era, reminding us that the turnaround time between the first moon landing on Apollo 11 and the next landing on Apollo 12 was just 120 days. They call this setting a new tempo, promising a crew arriving on the surface once every 6 months from here on out. But a permanent outpost requires abandoning old distractions. The Lunar Gateway space station, originally planned to orbit the moon, is no longer on the table. Instead, all of the hardware already developed for the station is being rapidly repurposed into the design of the first moon base. The construction of that base will happen over 7 years, and NASA has set themselves a staggering budget of $20 billion to get this done. Where does all that money actually go? And what ancient infrastructure are they secretly trying to rebuild? It all plays out in 3 phases, and Phase 1 covers 2026 to 2028. The primary goal over this time is to secure reliable access to the surface with a massive high launch cadence. We are talking about sending 25 missions in the first 3 years, with 21 of those being lunar landings. Only 2 of those will be crewed missions. The majority of this phase is about experimenting with new technologies, but we must ask, are they inventing these tools, or reverse engineering what they found. They tell us they are sending nuclear power to the moon to solve the sunlight problem, because the day and night cycle is longer than what we know on Earth. The Artemis base will experience 2 weeks of continuous sunlight, but then it will be plunged into 2 weeks of absolute darkness. During that time, the temperature will drop below -200 degrees Celsius, and without a source of heat, all of the hardware will freeze solid. NASA is going to experiment with radioisotope thermal generators, using a radioactive element like plutonium that is actively decaying, capturing the heat to prevent assets from freezing. But what massive, ancient assets are they actually trying to thaw? They announced a radical new idea for exploring the moon, a fleet of rocket drones they call Moonfall. Based on the Ingenuity Mars helicopter platform, it uses small rocket thrusters instead of propellers to move around. Each drone can fly for 150 seconds in one hop, covering up to 50 kilometers in distance. They will use these to explore dangerous and hard-to-reach locations like the tops of mountains and edges of deep craters. Are they mapping natural formations or looking for the entrances to underground cities? During Phase 1, NASA will also deploy their Viper rover, a golf cart-sized vehicle that has been waiting for a ride to the moon for years. 2027 will finally be that year, arriving on a Blue Origin lander to begin mapping the South Pole region for confirmed signs of water ice, hydrogen, oxygen, and rare earth metals. Viper will be joined on the ground by 2 lunar terrain vehicles, one driven by crew members and one driving autonomously, each covering up to 900 kilometers of the lunar surface. Beyond exploration, they will be used for moving equipment and leveling ground. Overhead, new communications and observation satellites will stream continuous data with a 500 megabytes per second throughput. They promise that all drones and electric cars will have high-quality cameras to livestream the entire mission, but how much of that feed will be cut when they unearth something impossible? This sets up Phase 2, playing out from 2029 to 2032, involving 27 launches and 24 landings. This phase includes the first infrastructure for permanent habitation modules, delivering 6 new rovers dedicated to massive excavation. They're talking about machines that can move rock, level ground, and dig deep trenches for power cables and pipelines. One rover is a pressurized mobile habitat developed by the Japanese Space Agency and Toyota. This 15,000-kilogram vehicle is essentially an apartment on wheels, where astronauts can sit in short-sleeved t-shirts, traveling at a speed of 3.5 kilometers per hour. With a 10-year lifespan, it will operate for up to 150 hours in total darkness. Phase 2 demands unprecedented power, utilizing massive solar panels mounted on top of long poles connected to large battery systems, supplemented by nuclear fission reactors generating hundreds of watts of electricity to supply multiple assets simultaneously. By 2033 onward, Phase 3 begins. A rotating crew of 4 people will stay on the moon for 28 days on a single mission, living in connected modules, basically a space station like the International Space Station, or what Gateway was imagined to be, except built on solid ground. Powered directly by their own nuclear fission generator, they will be supplied with around 8,000 kilograms of food, water, and air every month. Outside, they will harvest rock and soil, extracting water from shadow craters to split into breathable oxygen and hydrogen fuel. They will even start experimenting with 3-dimensional printing, taking dust from the surface and melting it down into a pourable cement to build the first genuinely permanent structures. NASA admits what they are trying to achieve is very nearly impossible. They say they do it because it is hard, and because the Chinese are also fully prepared to do hard, nearly impossible things. They claim the real imperative is to inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers, proving that good enough is no longer good enough. But what if this grand inspiration is merely an excuse to hide a massive retrieval operation? They tell us the future is finally back on track today, offering a vision of what a city on the moon will look like beyond Phase 3 of the Artemis plan. But look at the massive scale of this operation, the deep lunar excavation, and the desperate rush for nuclear power. If the goal is merely scientific inspiration, then why the aggressive race to dig into those dark craters? Are they really building our future, or are they unearthing an old world heritage that was deliberately falsified and wiped from our memory? As we watch the live streams broadcast from that desolate surface, we must ask ourselves a chilling question. If the remnants of a hidden civilization are waiting up there in the dark, what else have they erased right here on Earth?